It started with a message. Just a simple, "Hey, how have you been?" From someone who had once sat 3 desks down from her in an open concept office filled with clacking keyboards and the smell of burnt coffee. That was over 5 years ago. They hadn't spoken since she left the firm to focus on her family, but there he was. David. His name blinked softly in her message requests, and for a second she hovered over it. It was harmless. Her husband, Mark, had been more distant lately. Not cruel or neglectful, just distracted. Their days had fallen into a routine of quiet dinners, small talk about bills and school schedules, and tired kisses before sleep. The excitement, the spark, had dulled. She wasn't even sure if she missed it until David's message made her feel something again. Seen, even, she replied. They caught up. At first, it was all benign. Updates about jobs, memories from the office, the occasional meme that made her laugh in the middle of folding laundry. But the tone shifted gradually. He started complimenting her photos, especially the ones she posted from years ago when she still wore heels and lipstick. And she didn't stop him. In the quiet moments of the afternoon, while Mark was at work and their daughter Emma was at school, she would wait for David's messages. Her phone buzzed with anticipation. She started dressing differently, even when she had nowhere to go, curling her hair, applying mascara, spritzing perfume, just in case they video chatted. And then one day, they did. The first call was innocent enough, just two old friends catching up face to face. But she felt the heat in his gaze through the screen, the way he leaned in when she laughed, how his voice dropped when he said her name. He told her he used to have a crush on her back then. She smiled. She told him she knew. She lied. The calls grew longer and the tension grew stronger. They talked about dreams, about loneliness, about all the things they never said out loud to the people they lived with. The conversations danced dangerously close to the edge. She told herself it wasn't cheating. There was no touching, no meetings, no physical betrayal. But her heart pounded when she saw his name pop up, and that was betrayal enough. On a gray Saturday afternoon, the house felt quiet and heavy. Mark had taken Emma to her dance recital, one she had told him she'd skip because she wasn't feeling well. That was another lie. She had already planned her call with David. She set up her laptop in the home office and dimmed the lights. She wore a blouse she hadn't touched in years, one with a low neckline, and let her hair down. Her hands trembled as she clicked the call button. David answered instantly, and the look on his face made her blush. They spoke in soft voices, flirting under the weight of something that felt dangerously real. "You look incredible," he said. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky. They talked, they smiled, and they leaned closer to the screen. Her heart thudded with a mixture of guilt and excitement. Her fingers played with her necklace, and she tried not to think about the fact that she was sitting in the same room where she helped her daughter with homework just the day before. Then came the sound that shattered everything. The front door opened. She froze. She wasn't supposed to hear that sound for another hour. Panic surged through her as she yanked her blouse closed and slammed the laptop shut. Her breathing was shallow, her hands shaking violently. She stood up, dizzy with fear, and stumbled into the hallway. Mark was there, holding Emma's dance bag in one hand, a puzzled look on his face. "I thought you were sick," he said slowly, his eyes narrowing as he scanned her appearance. Makeup, perfume, the blouse. "Why are you dressed like that?" She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. And then Emma bounded in from behind him, laughing, her little voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Mommy, I did my spin. Daddy said he'd show you the video." Mark's eyes didn't leave hers. "What were you doing just now?" His voice was calm, deadly calm. She stammered. "It was nothing, just a call with a friend." His jaw clenched. "What kind of friend?" "Someone from work. A long time ago. It wasn't anything." "Who?" She swallowed hard. "David. From the old firm." He looked past her into the office. "Was that why the door was closed?" "I just wanted privacy." "For what?" Emma looked between them now, confused and silent, the brightness of her entrance fading. Mark's voice dropped. "What kind of call was it?" She couldn't lie anymore. Not with her daughter standing between them. Not with her husband's eyes staring through her like he was trying to find the woman he married somewhere deep inside her. "It got out of hand," she whispered. "It started as talking. Just Talking. He dropped the bag. It landed with a thud. Emma jumped. Mark turned away for a second, running his hand over his face. When he looked back at her, his eyes were red. "Were you on camera?" he asked, his voice hollow. She nodded slowly, shame flooding her like ice water. He stared at her for a long, heavy moment before stepping back. "I need to think," he said quietly. "I can't look at you right now." He turned to Emma. "Go to your room, sweetie. Daddy needs to talk to Mommy." Emma hesitated. She looked scared. Her small fingers clutched her sweater tightly. "Did Mommy do something bad?" Neither of them answered. Mark just said, "Go on." When she was gone, he shut the door behind her and turned back to his wife. The silence between them was suffocating. "I never touched him," she said, her voice cracking. "It was just words. Just calls." He laughed bitterly. "Do you think that makes it better?" "I wasn't happy," she said, barely able to meet his eyes. He slammed his hand against the wall, making her flinch. "And you think I was? You think this marriage has been easy for me? Do you know how hard I've tried to hold this together while you drifted away and shut me out?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. He shook his head. "You made it happen. I was lonely." "And you think I wasn't?" he snapped. "But I didn't run to someone else. I didn't hide behind a screen and flirt while our daughter was in the next room. I didn't invite another man into our life like some ghost." She stepped toward him, tears in her eyes. "Please, don't," he said coldly. "Don't beg. Not yet. You don't even understand what you've done." He walked out of the room and down the basement stairs. She heard the door slam shut behind him. The house was silent again, but not the comforting silence she used to know. This was different. Cold, heavy, broken. She sat on the couch, head in her hands, and cried. Upstairs, Emma called out for her. She wiped her face and forced herself to stand. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like. She didn't know if she'd still have a husband, if her daughter would look at her the same way again. All she knew was that the line she crossed could never be uncrossed, and the damage had only just begun. Mark didn't come back upstairs that night. She waited for hours, listening to the muffled sounds of the basement door creak, with every shift in temperature, hoping for footsteps. The silence swallowed her whole. Every ticking second dragged guilt through her chest like shards of glass. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. She sat on the edge of their bed, still in the blouse she wore during the call, too ashamed to change, too afraid to look in the mirror. The house was dark except for the small hallway light outside Emma's room. Occasionally, she heard her daughter turn over in her bed, murmuring in her sleep. The innocence of it was unbearable. She had shattered something sacred today, and it wasn't just between her and Mark. Sometime past 3 a.m., she crept downstairs, tiptoeing like a thief in her own home. She hesitated at the basement door, her hand trembling on the knob. Then, she slowly turned it and descended into the dimly lit space. Mark was sitting on the old couch, hunched forward, elbows on his knees, his phone in his hand, but the screen black. She stepped carefully into the room, her voice barely a whisper. "Can we talk?" He didn't look at her. "I don't know what to say." "I'm sorry," she said, her throat tightening. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I really am." He exhaled, slow and bitter. "You weren't sorry earlier. You were excited. You were smiling." Her face flushed with shame. "I didn't know you were coming home early." "That's not the point," he snapped, finally looking at her. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression hollow. "You were in our house, while I was with our daughter, proud of her, cheering her on. You were down here with another man, laughing, flirting, putting on a show. It wasn't a show." "Then what was it?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Because it looked like one to me. You don't dress like that for old friends. You don't shut the door for innocent conversations." "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," he said, his voice lower now, more exhausted than angry. "You did, and you meant every step that led up to it. This didn't come out of nowhere. You made choices. Every single message, every call, every secret, you chose them." She lowered her head, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "I felt invisible." He stared at her for a long moment. "And I didn't. I work. I help with Emma. I try to be here, but you pulled away. And instead of telling me, instead of fighting for us, You found a fantasy. She didn't argue. She couldn't. Everything he said was true. Mark rubbed his face, then stood slowly. I need space. I'm sleeping down here tonight. Mark, please. Don't, he said again, firmer now. I can't even look at you without seeing it. She nodded, stepping back, her heart breaking in ways she couldn't put into words. As she climbed the stairs alone, the gravity of what she had done began to fully settle in. This wasn't a minor lapse. This was betrayal. And it had a face. Heron. The next morning was worse. Emma bounded into the kitchen, cheerful and unaware, asking for pancakes. Mark stayed downstairs. She made breakfast mechanically, flipping batter and blinking away tears. Emma noticed. Are you okay, Mommy? She forced a smile. Just tired, sweetie. Did you and Daddy fight? Children always knew more than they were supposed to. She knelt down beside her, brushing hair from her face. Sometimes grown-ups argue, but we love you, always. That won't change. Emma's little brows furrowed, her eyes wise beyond their years. You promise? I promise. They sat in the kitchen, eating in silence, until Mark emerged hours later. He didn't touch the food, just walked past them, nodding at Emma with a weak smile, not even a glance for her. Later that day, she heard him on the phone in the living room, quietly speaking to someone. When she walked in, he ended the call abruptly and stood. His tone was calm but firm. I'll be staying at my brother's for a few days. I need time to think. Does he know? No, he said. And I won't tell him, not yet. What do I tell Emma? That I need to help Uncle Jeff with some work, he said. I'll call her every day. She felt like she was falling through the floor. Mark, please. Let's go to therapy. Let's talk to someone. We can fix this. He laughed softly, bitterly. You think this is something a couple sessions can fix? I'm willing to try. I'll do anything. You should have thought of that before you turned our marriage into a sideshow, he said, his voice sharp. Her eyes welled up again. I didn't mean for it to go so far. I just wanted to feel something. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and it was worse than anything he'd said. There was no hatred in his eyes, just heartbreak. You could have come to me. I would have listened. I would have tried. I know, she whispered, but you didn't. And now I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She didn't stop him when he packed a small bag. She didn't argue as he kissed Emma on the forehead and walked out the door. She stood there, frozen, the house echoing with the absence of him. Emma asked where he was going, and she repeated the lie he'd told her voice cracking. That night, she sat alone in the bedroom, surrounded by the pieces of her mistake. The laptop still sat on the desk across the room. She hated it now. Hated the way she'd used it to escape instead of face the truth. She opened it one last time. David had sent a message. I hope everything's okay. That was intense. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she typed back, It's not okay. I made a huge mistake. Don't contact me again. And then she deleted the app. It was over. The fantasy, the escape, the lies. All gone. But so was the trust, and maybe, just maybe, the marriage. She didn't sleep again that night. Emma crawled into bed with her at some point, sensing something was wrong. Her small hand curled around her mother's arm, and for the first time in days, she cried openly, not out of fear or guilt, but grief. Grief for the life she had, for the man who loved her, for the quiet moments she took for granted, for the part of herself she'd lost to recklessness and ego, and for the possibility that some things, once broken, never come back the same. The sun crept through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the bedroom floor. She hadn't slept, again. Her body ached from the weight of emotions that hadn't let up since the moment Mark walked through that door and caught her. Emma was still curled beside her, breathing softly, clutching a corner of the blanket in her small hand. The innocence of that sleep, that trust, was unbearable. She rose slowly, careful not to wake her daughter. Her movements felt robotic now, mechanical and hollow. Downstairs, the house felt foreign. Every room reminded her of something they had built together. The framed pictures on the mantel, the worn spots on the couch where Mark would fall asleep during movies, Emma's drawings taped proudly to the fridge. It all carried a silence now, one that pressed on her like a storm waiting to break. By mid-morning, Emma came downstairs, rubbing her eyes, asking if Daddy was back. She knelt in front of her, smoothing down her tangled curls. "He's still helping Uncle Jeff," she said, her voice thin but steady. "But he'll call you later." Emma looked at her mother for a long moment. "Did you and Daddy fight again?" She hesitated, her heart splitting. "Yes, sweetie, but grown-ups sometimes need a little space to understand things better." "Are you going to say sorry?" Her throat tightened. "Yes, I already did. But some things take time to fix." Emma didn't respond. She just nodded and padded toward the living room to watch. Cartoons, her little face unusually quiet. By noon, the phone rang. Mark. Her hands shook as she picked it up. "Hi," she said cautiously. "I want to talk to Emma." "Of course." She handed the phone to her daughter and watched as her face lit up, hearing her father's voice. It was both beautiful and crushing. He still called, still cared, at least about Emma. That mattered more than anything now. After the call, she sat outside on the back steps for the first time in days. The sky was clear, the spring breeze cool against her face. She used to love sitting there in the early mornings with coffee, while Mark made breakfast and Emma colored on the porch. Now it felt like another version of someone else's life. She thought back to the first message she'd exchanged with David. It had seemed harmless, familiar, comforting even. She hadn't felt seen in a long time. Between motherhood, household routines, and the quiet drift that happens in long marriages, she had started feeling like furniture, functional, dependable, unnoticed. David made her feel otherwise, heard, attractive, alive. But it was false comfort, temporary, and devastating in its aftermath. She remembered the look on Mark's face as he caught her mid-call, the disbelief, the betrayal. It had been less about the act itself and more about everything it represented. The months of secrets, the quiet decisions that pushed them further apart. Trust wasn't just broken, it had been burned. That afternoon, she finally did what she'd been avoiding. She sat down at the kitchen table and wrote him a letter. Not a text, not an email. A real handwritten letter. Something about it felt more vulnerable, more sincere. She poured out everything. The loneliness she hadn't spoken about, the longing for connection, the way she felt herself slowly fading into roles and forgetting who she was. She didn't defend her actions, didn't make excuses. She simply owned it. She told him she knew what she'd lost, that if he decided not to come back, she'd understand, that she would always be grateful for the years they'd had and the daughter they'd raised, and that she would never stop trying to be better for Emma and for herself. She left the letter on the kitchen counter and took Emma out for a walk around the neighborhood. They needed air. They needed each other. As they walked, Emma held her hand tightly, occasionally glancing up with questions she never asked aloud. When they returned, Mark's car was in the driveway. Her heart stopped. She froze on the sidewalk for a moment, unsure of what to do, but Emma tugged at her hand excitedly. "Daddy's home!" Mark was sitting at the kitchen table when they came in. Her letter was open in front of him, his hands resting beside it. He looked tired, worn down in a way she hadn't seen before. Emma ran to him, hugging his waist. He scooped her up, held her for a long moment, kissed her forehead, and set her down gently. Then, he looked at his wife. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice quiet. She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. He walked into the living room, and she followed, sitting across from him. Emma disappeared upstairs to play, sensing without being told that this was a grown-up moment. "I read your letter," he began. "Thank you for writing it. It hurt. But it also helped." She folded her hands, afraid to say too much. "I'm not ready to decide anything yet," he continued. "But I'm not leaving Emma. That's not negotiable. I'll be here, maybe not sleeping in the same bed, but present." She nodded. "That's fair." He studied her, his eyes still clouded with pain. "I don't know how we move forward, but if we do, it's going to be slow and honest. No more secrets. There won't be, she promised, tears stinging her eyes. I swear. I'm not doing this for you, he added. I'm doing it for our daughter. She deserves a home that's not filled with silence and tension. And maybe somewhere down the line we can figure out what we are to each other again. She didn't expect forgiveness. Not today, maybe not ever. But she nodded, grateful for even this sliver of possibility. I'll do the work, Mark, whatever it takes. They sat in silence for a while. It wasn't warm or resolved. It was heavy and real. But it was better than nothing. That evening, they had dinner together as a family for the first time in days. It was awkward, quiet, filled with pauses that said more than words could. But Emma laughed once when Mark made a silly face at his broccoli, and they both smiled at the sound. Later, as she tucked Emma into bed, her daughter whispered, I'm glad Daddy came back. She kissed her forehead. Me too. And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. Not with guilt or desperation, but with hope. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Because some cracks don't mean the end. Sometimes they're just the beginning of understanding what truly matters, and who you're willing to become when everything else is stripped away.